Hello, my name is Alex Montgomery, and I'm a member of the the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board. Welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics, and thank you for attending this afternoon's program. The Dole Student Advisory Board is composed of KU students committed to the work of the Dole Institute. We attend regular meetings, assist in events like this, and plan an SAB-sponsored program every semester. Members of the SAB receive great opportunities to network with our special guests. If you are a member and would like to join, please contact the Dole Institute. The Dole Institute would like to hear from you. If you enjoy this afternoon's program, please let us know by contacting us on Facebook, Twitter, or through our website email. Your attendance and feedback helps shape future programming. To view past programs, visit our online video archive at www.doleinstitute.org. A video of tonight's presentation will be available on our website soon. Before we begin today, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. After the presentation, we will have some time for audience questions and answers. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a student helper with a microphone will come to you. Please just ask one brief question. Finally, if at any time during the program you have trouble hearing, ask a staff member or a student volunteer who will assist you. And now, please welcome Bill Lacy.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thanks to all of you for coming out this afternoon. It's a beautiful day, and it's great that you chose to come and sit inside the Dole Institute for an hour or so and learn some very important things about an important gentleman. My name is Bill Lacy, the director of the Dole Institute, and we're delighted to have you here. This is the first of 3 programs that we plan over the summer. Hopefully you've heard about the other 2. There will be a program that we've done for quite a few years on the evening of July 16th. We will feature a historical interpreter. The interpreter that night will be interpreting Amelia Earhart, so it's very appropriate and special for Kansas. I think you'll enjoy it. And we do that program as part of our Youth Civic Leadership Institute, where we bring in 60 to 70 high school seniors from high school juniors now who are about to become high school seniors, from all over the state of Kansas to a leadership camp for 3 days here at the Dole Institute, and you'll get a chance to see them. They'll be part of the audience at that event. So that's something that you'll want to see and take advantage of. And then we have one other program scheduled for our summertime as of right now, and that is on July 29th at 3 p.m. We'll have Mr. Ian Taylor here. He is an international mountain guide. He has guided and climbed Mount Everest. He leads treks to the Khumbu region. It should be a fascinating afternoon, so take advantage of that opportunity too. We're delighted that we can provide you with a little bit of intellectual content during the summer, so take advantage of it. And thanks to all of you for coming out today. I think most people probably know I'm not a Kansan, and so I wasn't really familiar with Mr. Willard Garvey when I got a copy of the book from the Independent Institute, but I did a little bit of research on him, and I had a chance to spend a little bit of time, come on in folks, spend a little bit of time with the book, and I think you're in for a fascinating and a very educational afternoon. Maura McEnaney has extensive experience in journalism and has worked at Bloomberg as well as the Akron Beacon Journal, among others. Maura has been a close friend of the Garvey family for some time and gained a lot of very useful insights from that friendship. Her work's about a business force that really needed to be better known, and I think she's done a great job laying out exactly who Willard Garvey is. Please welcome to the Dole Institute, Maura McEnaney. Maura? Welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out, and on a glorious day indeed. Amelia Earhart program sounds interesting. She lived in Medford, Massachusetts, which is where I live, and we claim her as one of our own as well. So today I'm going to, I had a great day here today. This is an unbelievable building. It's a beautiful building. It's an amazing facility. I spent some time in the archives, which is why I was a little late, because I'm sort of nerdy and like to look at papers, and I had a wonderful visit with the archivist here at the Dole Institute, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. The theme of the mission is to encourage participation in the political process, and what you'll hear about a little bit today is Willard's own take on participating in the political process. Senator Dole also wrote a beautiful endorsement of the book, and I very much appreciated the kind words he had to say. I wish, too, that I could have heard some of the conversations between these two very powerful and opinionated men in Kansas history. I'm sure that they were very spirited conversations. So the book is called Willard Garvey, An Epic Life, and it's a story about a man who is an integral part of Kansas history. He was also really a part of America's history. And there's a bit of world history in there as well. The title of the book really isn't jargon. It seems like since I wrote it, I'm seeing the word epic everywhere. It's kind of come into the lexicon of the day. And I opened up the paper the other day about the Boston Red Sox, and it said, like, it was epic. And I keep thinking about the book, you know, like, oh, God. Anyway, but no, it wasn't that. So the title of the book takes its name of the Epic Center. If you've been to Wichita, you might know the 22-story office center that's there. It's the tallest building in Kansas at the time. And Willard Garvey built it in 1987 at a time when it was risky to build buildings like that. There was an oil bust, and it was a completely speculative building, and he wanted to build it. And so the Epic Center, and the name of the book really, in many ways, is a symbol of what Willard's accomplishments and also of his failures, which I'll tell you a little bit about. This was a man who thought big and certainly stood out from the crowd. For the building, although the building reverted back to its lenders 2 years after it opened, because it didn't have enough tenants. It was Class A office space, and again, the economy was bad, so it essentially didn't succeed as a commercial building. Today, it's a viable part of downtown, and it continues to be a viable part an integral part of Wichita. So Willard succeeded. He wanted to build this building, and it is everything he thought it would be, only he just didn't make the money he thought he would from it. Senator Dole once said that defeat is as much a part of my life as a victory. And there was a piece of legislation in 1987 that Senator Dole had worked on that he said it was a stunning defeat, and he said the bigger loss would have been to do nothing. And that's really how Willard felt about the Epic Center. He said to his son and several members of the company who had reluctantly approved the building to go forth, he said, I might regret building it, but if I don't build it, I'll regret it even more. Well, that's the kind of man he was. I found Willard really to be a man of epic ideas, epic ambitions, and epic achievements. He identified himself, let's see if I can do the slides right. That's a picture there of the Epic Center. I don't know if any of you all been to Wichita? Okay, here it is then, for those of you who haven't, good. He identified himself as a builder, but his business ventures really crossed a wide spectrum. As head of Garvey Industries and its subsidiaries Builders, Inc., Petroleum, Inc., Garvey International, and Nevada First Corp., which was a ranch out in Nevada where I first met him. Willard had a vision, some say he had 1,000 visions, to not only build downtown's tallest building, but as a rancher, he built a big private dam out in the middle of the sagebrush in Nevada, the largest private dam in the state. He owned newspapers, he owned some television stations, and he even owned a flour mill in Trinidad. And when communism was rearing its head in the 60s, and it was appearing to be a worldwide threat, he launched an innovative overseas housing project designed to, quote, make every man a homeowner and every man a capitalist, because he believed that if you were a homeowner, then you'd be a capitalist and we could thwart communism. That's just some of the things he did. Willard liked to say that he loved Wichita because it was the furthest he could get from both coasts. But he really loved Wichita because he wanted it to be something more. He loved Wichita for what he always wanted it to be, and he wanted it to be a world-class city. He tried his best, really, to make that happen. He saw the Epic Center as a way to attract new companies to high-end downtown office space. It could, as he said, I think it might have been in this article here, fuel a switch from dependence on governments and centralized elites. It could revitalize individual competitive action. It could fulfill a dream. So I started the book off with the story of Epic for all those reasons, because it was really a symbol of who Willard was and what he hoped to accomplish, and really what he left behind. In case you've never heard it, has anybody here heard of the Garveys before? Okay, good. This front row here might know them. There's some folks from Wichita. Let's see if I can do this. So Willard Garvey was the oldest son of Kansas entrepreneur Ray Hugh Garvey and Olive White Garvey here on the slide. Ray Hugh Garvey, they both made a fortune in western Kansas farming and grain elevators, oil and service stations, and home buildings in the 40s and 50s. If you want to know more, I can really recommend, there's an essay on Ray Garvey in this very good book called John Brown to Bob Dole, Movers and Shakers in Kansas History. It might even be on sale here at the bookstore. But there's a very nice essay about Ray Garvey in that book. The Garvey legacy really is known across the state. And in the Kansas Historical Society, not only do they have his private papers, but they have this cool baseball trading cards that talk about Ray and Olive and their contributions to business in Kansas. If you go out to Topeka Way and around Washburn University, where these two both met and went to school and met, there's a lot of buildings named after the Garveys. Willard's sister, their oldest daughter, Ruth Garvey Fink, lives in Topeka and was a big supporter of Senator Dole's. She left a big legacy of her own out that way. Hold on. So to tell the story of this man, I had to tell really, it's really an American story. You know, I had to move him through history. I wanted everybody outside of Kansas to read the book. So this is a book really that takes a look at a man through it's a story as seen through the eyes of really a bold, independent Kansas entrepreneur. He wasn't afraid to lose money for an idea he believed in. And as I say, I did move him through history from the time he grew up in Colby, Kansas, and then he moved to Wichita when he was 8 years old. In the book, we learn about the pioneering spirit of Willard's ancestors, about the Great Depression, the dirty 30s, the Dust Bowl days, and the toll that war takes on a community and on parents who are unable to talk to their children for 4 years, and the Red Scare of the mid-20th century, just to name a few. Like Senator Dole, Willard Garvey was a member of the greatest generation, preserved really beautifully here in this institution. The last few days, I know we've heard of the anniversary of D-Day, and I was pleased to see Senator Dole's essay in the Washington Post last week. We can never really forget this generation. They're leaving us a bit more every day. I read one today. They call it, in Boston, they call it the Irish sports pages when you read the obituaries. And I read the obituaries for fun. But I'm so interested in people's lives, and I just read another World War II veteran passed away today in our community. But the experiences of these two true Kansas optimists, I think they were both truly optimists, were very different in war and in life. Senator Dole was poor from Russell, as you know, and Garvey was the son of a wealthy businessman, came from western Kansas and Colby. Bob Dole was gravely wounded in Italy 3 weeks before the war ended, and Major Willard Garvey, I like to say that he didn't get his fingernails dirty in the war, but that's probably not true. He had what he called an interesting war. He was swimming competitively in London, and when he worked in the Adjutant General's office, and he then went to France, and after that, after the Allied victory in Europe, he went to Potsdam and set up the Potsdam Conference there. And I detail that in the book, really through a series of letters called V-mails that he wrote to and from his parents. It really was an extraordinary account of his time in the war and their wishes for him and not being able to connect. It was very touching for me to be able to go through that. So these two men, they shared a love of country, and they returned to the U.S. to achieve great accomplishments, again, although at different ends of the spectrum. Senator Dole eventually chose politics, and Willard, I've been screwing up the slides. There's two of his pictures from the war. And Willard came back and chose his partner in life, Jean Kendall Garvey, a beautiful woman who was his partner for life and was with him at every turn, really. After he chose Jean, he came back to really challenge the role of government. And as he liked to say, patriot and government are two unrelated subjects. He didn't do it to be difficult. He did it because he was an ardent believer in individual freedoms, private enterprise, and the limited role of government, long before really it was fashionable to do so. Willard often said, I was a voice in the wilderness for 50 or 60 years, and it took the rest of the world that long to catch up. Another picture of Jean and Willard. They did everything together. They were together their whole lives, and she was as much a partner in his ventures as anyone. Willard, he wasn't afraid to speak up. Willard took action. He believed in less taxation. You could hear his voice over and over again, some would say. Some were afraid to walk up to him at cocktail parties because they thought that he was going to drone on about the role of government and how invasive it was. But he also went to local meetings. He was at editorial boards. He was not a man who was afraid to put himself out there for what he believed in. And he was an avid letter writer. He wrote tons of letters, and I had one letter that I thought was pretty funny that I found, and I'm sure that there's a bunch downstairs that I haven't ever looked at, but it was a letter that Senator Dole wrote back to Willard and said, thank you for your suggestion that the U.S. government should declare bankruptcy, but I'm not quite sure that that would be a good idea right now. I got a kick out of it. But Willard was no armchair critic, really. He spent his life coming up with ideas in an effort to create wealth. For himself, yes, but really he wanted to create it for others. He would come up with ideas, again, 40 or 50 years ahead of time. He wanted to do a video dog training program, thought that would be a good idea, long before Cesar Millan ever came to be. He just had these, he was a visionary, and I think sometimes people laughed at him when he came up with these ideas, but he was really seeing the future. Willard's civic actions were of the grassroots variety. He loved to see people get together and discuss the topics of the day. He would promote block meetings where residents would get together and talk about take a topic and then ask themselves 3 questions. A, what's wrong? B, what's right? And C, what can I do about it? And so he would promote these neighborhood meetings. And so what can he do about it? He chose to do plenty. Beginning in the 1950s, every Saturday for decades, he would bring together a core group of like a dozen like-minded men at a local Wichita hotel or coffee shop and banter over the rising taxes and what they could do about it. The group eventually became known to be called Homeowners Trust and later Homeowners Tax Foundation. And they put forth successful campaigns to lower property taxes, defeat bond issues, and keep government accountable. I actually met some of those folks. After Willard had passed on, there were some meetings out at Park Lane Shopping Center where Builders Inc. was. And some of those guys were still just talking about chewing the fat, talking about what was wrong with government and what they could do about it. It was really kind of fun. I think that group has dwindled, but it was neat to kind of see the remnants of that core group. Willard didn't take personal credit for anything. He just felt it was the right thing to do. And going back to his home ownership, he believed that home ownership motivated people to help themselves. I can't help but think when I was writing this book, what the internet must have been, what it would have done for Willard. I mean, you have to think about it. It was long before the internet. Today people have an issue, they get online, they get petitions online, they create communities online, they take action online. That wasn't happening, obviously, in the 60s and 70s. And so he really came up with these plans to how do we bring people together and had little handouts and what can I do and follow-ups. It was really kind of phenomenal to see it. He launched newspapers because he felt that government was really controlling too much of the newspaper news that he had, so he wanted to create a newspaper that promoted free ideas. He promoted right-to-work laws. He even decided at one point, and I write about it in the book, to try to start his own country, which is a very interesting little chapter. I won't go into too much of it, but he did try to start his own country in an atoll in the Pacific. So he had a share of critics too. Some people saw him as a profiteering businessman who criticized government yet welcomed federal money and programs that would support his projects. His father, Ray Garvey, was one that was criticized for the very same thing, and Ray would say, "We operate under the program, we don't set it." He created the National Center for Privatization in 1983 and promoted privatizing everything from, sewers to roads to jails. Again, it might have seemed like a crazy idea back then, but we've seen a lot of that go on today. And he was again, pretty much looking forward. Besides marrying Jean, Willard said his single best idea involved home ownership, as I mentioned. It was really outside U.S. borders, and the project was rooted in the geopolitical uncertainty of the 1960s. He started out as a home builder, as I mentioned earlier. Ray Garvey was building post-World War II homes, and prior to that, homes to help people that were in the aviation industry and needed a place to live. So small, brick homes throughout Wichita. That's what Ray Garvey did a lot of that. And Willard came back from the war and he started building some of these homes with his father, and he enjoyed it. But during the 1950s and 60s, as I say, when communism started to come, he felt that he had a solution to communism, and that if you made people a capitalist, it would go away. So I'm going to read you a little bit about that project. The seeds for what Willard called his single best idea were rooted in the economic and geopolitical uncertainty of the late 1950s. In the second term of the Eisenhower presidency, Americans were still on guard against the spread of communism, which seemed to be moving through the world like a deadly virus. In Germany, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev taunted the U.S. over control of a divided Berlin, while in Mexico, Cuban rebel Fidel Castro prepared to invade his homeland in a 1959 overthrow that would put the communist threat just 90 miles off the Florida coast. In backyards and basements across the country, Americans, including the Garveys, constructed fallout shelters they hoped would protect them from a hydrogen bomb attack. Eisenhower, the war veteran, fully understood the fragility of international borders and chose to fight for worldwide democracy by encouraging private investment overseas. Targeting a development in so-called uncommitted nations would introduce the free enterprise system and a capitalist democracy to these countries, or so the thinking went. That kind of talk was right up Willard's alley. Like other tried and true military men, he was alarmed over the prospect of global communism and wanted to do his part to fight it. After hearing Wichita oil man Fred Koch talk about the ominous conditions in communist Russia, Willard took Jean to some of the Koch-sponsored meetings of the conservative John Birch Society, where members discussed ways to stop communism's seemingly growing influence on American life. Perhaps it was one of those meetings in the Koch's large basement adorned with mounted big game catches from exotic locales, where Willard first heard the phrase, "less government, more responsibility, and a better world." And while he did not subscribe to all of the John Birch Society's teaching, the group's motto spoke to Willard directly. When a national recession and a clampdown on federally financed housing projects slowed business at Garvey's Builders, Inc. subsidiary, Willard began to think of ways to keep building and help counter the communist threat at the same time. The result was a new venture that combined his passion for home building with the Garvey's largesse in the wheat business. He called it World Homes, and for 13 years it brought him the personal high of providing low-cost housing to the working poor in developing countries. It also brought him the frustrating low of dealing with derailing bureaucracies, political upheavals, vast cultural misunderstandings, and employee theft. It never really brought him profits, only the satisfaction that because of World Homes, someone somewhere had a better place to live. Willard probably spent millions on it, Harvey Childers said, one of his key executives over the years. Most of the projects were a one-way street. Money went out and very little came back. The profits on one project would be eaten up before we could get the next project developed. So this was a project that is a kind of a complicated equation, but it did involve the Food for Peace project that I know Senator Dole was involved in. And Willard went and petitioned the government to try to rework the way we were dealing with selling wheat to countries overseas, that they had to keep some of the money in their country. And then he worked a legislative angle, actually, to allow some of that money be turned into loans for poor people in these countries. And one of the countries was in Lima, Peru. People there were living in shanties, if they had a home at all. It was a very awful place. They couldn't get loans. Only the very rich could get loans, and it was 30% loans or something like that. And through this program, Willard created a community for working class people where they could go, have a little house, maybe add on to it over the years. And that community, it was one of his very successful projects. Some of the projects, as I said, didn't really go exactly as he wanted because of political issues, but in Lima, Peru today, some of those homes still exist. And I communicated with a woman who was doing some research on this, and she did send me back some pictures. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. But years later, Jean Garvey went back to Lima, Peru, and they greeted her with a huge entourage of people and took her to a hall and feted her and sang for her, and there's a plaque named after Willard Garvey in this little community of Peru. So it really did make a difference for him. Willard went overseas truly, but it was really about Kansas and about Wichita where he did his best work. And I'll read you a little bit about that. Despite pursuits in faraway places such as Peru, the South Pacific, and the wilds of Nevada, Willard Garvey did his most influential work in the city along the Arkansas River. "Where you are is all that counts," he once said. "You cannot solve problems that are in a vicinity where you are not. If you will solve the problem where you are, if each person will help their neighbor solve the problem where he is, all problems disappear because they are solved." From the time he launched the HOT meetings in 1959, those are those homeowners trust meetings I just talked about, Willard fought local officials on everything from the new jail to a downtown tax district to the cost of air conditioning systems for the public schools. In 1990, he launched Total Quality Wichita, a program that urged residents to form neighborhood block groups so they could get together and solve their own problems by helping one another. He fought against government-driven downtown improvement projects and encouraged entrepreneurship at all levels. Again, the Dole Institute's mission is to promote political and civic participation. And I believe really that everyone could take a lesson from Willard Garvey. Today we see the Epic Center lit up at night, and it still makes me think about him. There were countless examples of how he touched this community and how he can really make all of us think about how we're participating in our own communities. Willard died in 2002, I think that's right. And, he was not a beloved citizen in some ways. There were a group of people that thought he was doing the right things, but there were a lot of people that didn't like him, and the newspaper would often say not such great things about him and say, start every news article with "Millionaire Willard Garvey says." So when he died, you gotta wonder. But when he died, it was really very touching. They had a big editorial about it, and the newspaper said, "Wichita without Willard Garvey, unthinkable." The editorial in the Wichita Eagle said it all. Over the years, the newspaper may have taken its shots at Willard and disagreed with him wholeheartedly, but in the end, it could not deny his impact. Unlike few others in the city's history, Mr. Garvey helped shape how Wichitans think, or at least challenge them at every turn, to give his vision of limited government and privatized services a chance. The editors wrote at his passing. For some, it really wasn't just that what he was saying that was so important. It was that he took the time to say anything at all. Seven-term Republican Mayor Bob Knight certainly withstood his shares of ire from Willard Garvey in person and in print, as evidenced in this, one of his last letters to the editor, the volume of which could fill a book all its own. Willard writes, "Why does Wichita Mayor Bob Knight, as the person responsible and accountable for City Hall, confirm again and again that City Hall is a cheat?" And he was writing this as he was protesting a downtown tax district. "We didn't agree on fundamental political values," Mayor Knight said, and yet years after Willard's death, he believes both he and Wichita lost something significant. Willard had enormous resources, and he could have taken an easier path, Knight recalled, noting that Garvey purposely chose to focus on the minutiae of local government. The former mayor can still recall Willard's voice at countless meetings, how he pressed him and other candidates to sign no tax pledges, and how he always spoke up about his mistrust of government and was a passionate defender of his freedom. His commitment level was extraordinary, Knight said. He took his responsibility to be a steward of the community very seriously. That may have been Ray and all of Garvey's doing. "We didn't grow up saying that we were going to change the world," Willard's sister, Ruth Fink, remembered of her late siblings. "And none of us change the world, but you do what you can." So what is Wichita without Willard Garvey? Blander, said Carl Peter John, a county commissioner there. For some people, he was the anchovy on the pizza and the garlic in the stew. For other people who like anchovies and garlic, he was part of what made Wichita, Wichita, and part of what it is today, too. So I think that that's what really makes a difference today. Here's a man who lived, he took some bold steps to build this building and many other things, and he put himself out there to say what he really believed in life, and he failed, like Senator Dole, he failed at times, but the lasting impression is still there, and I think that's the lesson that we can get from Willard Garvey, is how do we make a difference in our own communities. Thank you, and thank you for being interested in this book. Any questions? Oh, come on. I came all this way, you have to ask your questions. Yes?
Memory faulty, or didn't he build a health center, and is that in your book?
Well, it was actually his mother, Olive Garvey, who put a lot of money into that, and the name of it is the Center for Human Functioning. It was a health center, a lot of holistic medicines. It's still there. It's a big geodesic dome when you drive down there. So it was mostly his mother that did a lot of that, but clearly he was a supporter of anything his mother did. Yes. Ray Garvey began first he was a farmer in Colby in the 40s and 50s, and then he called it find a need and fill it. So we were growing all this wheat, and then we needed a place to store it. So he started building grain elevators. And he did build grain elevators all over Kansas, and one of the largest grain elevators in the world, apparently, is the DeBruce grain elevator now outside Hayesville, I think it is, Hayesville, down... There's a big one in Hutchinson also that it was a Garvey grain, certainly, yes, but not as big as the one. There are big ones all over, yeah, but they're no longer in that business anymore.
Yes, I was just wondering what kind of financial situation this gentleman was in on his death, and how old was he when he died?
Well, he was a wealthy man, and he, always wealthy, yes. I mean, he lost some money. Yeah, it was an adventure to him, really. I mean, he lost money, and he would make money, and I don't think he was ever hurting for money. The Garvey enterprises covered so many businesses, from farming to real estate to shipping to, the Builders Inc. still exists in Wichita today. So there was a good source of income always. Yes, and but he grew what he got from his father and mother. He clearly multiplied many, many times. I do address some of that in the book as well. So he was just fine and left a lovely legacy to his wife Jean, who I believe was a great philanthropist and gave it all away. He died at 82 in 2002. But he was a very healthy man. He swam. He was as I say, he's a championship swimmer for the University of Michigan. And then he swam in the Army, and he swam every day almost until the day he died. He was extremely fit, but he died of a heart virus in 2002. Yes.
Was his wife from Kansas also?
Yes, she was from Wichita. She lived in the Riverside section of Wichita across the way. She was a local beauty queen. They met at a blind date, I think was it in Washburn? Or met in a blind date right after the war, and that was it. She said he was the best dancer he'd ever seen. She was a great dancer, and they raised their family in Wichita. They had 6 children. 2 of whom are here today. And they continue to do great work in Wichita. Some are involved in businesses. Most have decided to, sell the businesses and retire, but there's still a Garvey presence in Wichita today.
In terms of wheat, was there a terminal? Did he put together a terminal down in Tulsa that
That's James, I think. Yes, so
to where ocean-going ships could pick
yes,
up wheat?
yes. So when Ray and Olive died, the businesses were divided up. I'm believing that this was one business that went to his son James, and I think that they might have been doing that, but I know that there was a shipping business that came down the Mississippi also and had barges. Right? Yeah, okay, good. Phew.
There was a time in the 50s when the taxes were so astronomical. Sorry. There was a time in the 1950s that taxation was so high for anyone who made a profit that it was very hard to keep a company going. You had to sell your company practically to pay your taxes every year. And it did come very close to completely demolishing all of the Garvey enterprises because of the grain elevator outside of Wichita, which was at the time the largest grain elevator in the world. And I think it might still be the 2nd largest grain elevator in the world. I'm not sure anymore. Who knows about the world now, But it was very scary, The thing that's fascinating about entrepreneurs is that they are gutsy people. And they aren't scared to lose everything, and they do. They lose everything, and then they pick themselves up and do it again or do something else. And these are our heroes. So, grain was a very big part of the business, and everything stemmed from one other thing. So it's a fascinating read.
Well, that is a great question. I should have said that at the beginning, how I became interested in this book. I was a young journalist in 1979, and I landed, long story, but I landed in a little town called Winnemucca, Nevada, where I worked for the local newspaper there, and there weren't a lot of young women around, and I met one who's still young and beautiful, sitting over here in the corner, and we sat in the front row, I should say. We set out a long-time friendship. And over the years, I just came to know more and more about what the Garveys were about. I mean, she was just a girlfriend to me, and then I found out that there was this. I came to Wichita. I remember coming to Wichita and seeing the Garvey Center and saying, wow, this is something. And over the years, I sort of followed what the family had done, and after Willard passed, I asked if I could do his biography. So that's how I got interested in it.
It's interesting that the entrepreneurial spirit has passed on to the children, some of them, right?
I think it really was a Garvey legacy. Ray Garvey, Willard grew up at Ray Garvey's knee, where he almost, as Julie said, long before that, he almost lost everything again. And, you know, Willard heard his father talk about taxes. They were taxed at 90% at one point, and he would write long memos to his children about what the situation was and how he was trying to make it. And so this was clearly ideals that Olive and Ray instilled in their children. Olive Garvey was a great woman, as I say, Kansas Historical Society has it, but she's an author, and she wrote a book called Produce or Starve. And she was very much, espoused a lot of free market principles and, take care of yourself. We have to, teach people how to take care of themselves sort of principles. And yes, that was family talk. That was, everybody in the Garvey family can say that they grew up at the business table, from Willard and his children and now the grandchildren. Great.
If there are no further questions, if you'll meet us over at the front table by the door, there are copies of the books for sale, and she will be available to do some signings.
Thank you all for coming out. It was really a pleasure.